Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. So this is from Scientology Business, otherwise known as Alexander Barnes Ross. Survivor Stories Ex-Scientologists call on UK government to act. Posted on July 3rd, 2024 by Alexander Barnes Ross. Scientology first appeared in the United Kingdom in 1959, when science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard purchased St. Hill Manor, a rural country estate on the outskirts of East Grinstead, Sussex. It was to become their international headquarters, and to this day remains an important management base, responsible for much of Scientology's UK and European operations. Following a covert surveillance operation, a 1975 internal government report concluded the Church of Scientology does not merely persuade people to part with their money. It is a harmful movement with evil reputation. Despite this, and failing to obtain charity status, in 1999, after the Charity Commission ruled it does not benefit the public, it does not benefit the public, troll. Scientology's operation has continued to the UK, unchanged, unaltered, and unchallenged. Tomorrow, the UK population will head to the polls in what is widely expected to be an historic general election, ushering in an era of change. We call on the government to intervene on the issue of Scientology and finally put a stop to human suffering. These are just a handful of accounts written by former members who experienced Scientology's abusive practices firsthand, in their own words. In the 1980s and early 1990s, I spent time involved in Scientology in the UK. I was initially attached to Sunderland Org and also traveled to St. Hill Manor in West Sussex for training. The time involved in total was almost 7 years. The first instances of deception was in getting both my wife and I to join staff. This involved signing a contract for either 5 or 2.5 years. Up to that point, we had only positive experiences. During discussions about pay and conditions, we were assured that we would receive about £200 each, and it was this that made us take the plunge and sign up for 5 years. First week, we got nothing, and were told that as we were training, we wouldn't get full pay. But to get nothing at all was a shock, to say the least. So the contract is one of their bait and switch methods for the new ones. I was next sent to Sussex for training, and although my fares were paid, I was left to fend for myself regarding accommodation and food, and again for 6 weeks. I received no pay. My wife joined me, and now we were both trying to survive, spending 14 hours a day, studying, thereby not earning any money. After about 8 weeks, we received £40, but this went nowhere as we owed rent, not to mention had to buy food. My wife was pregnant during this period, so we were concerned about our unborn child too. Whose story is this, do you guys? I'm just wondering, is this Alex's story or someone else's? Fortunately or not, we had just sold our house and lived on the proceeds of that for a while. In the 3 years that I was associated with the Sunderland branch, I didn't get anywhere close to £200 in total, never mind weekly. As I learned more about the workings of this racket, I found out that pay depended on income. So if your org made no money, you didn't get paid anything. It's the stats. We were already committed, but things came to a point where we couldn't afford to carry on. We had our first child and were due a second. What little we received on benefits went on paying a babysitter so that we could work over 12 hours a day for Scientology. This was all quite ruthless as discipline got tighter. That's how they do it. The longer you were involved and the higher up the ladder you progressed. Makes me wonder what kind of blackmail material they had on Mike Rinder. And other people. Eventually we escaped by borrowing train fares from my wife's relations. And just going without telling anyone. If you told anyone you were thinking of leaving, they would try to prevent that at all costs. If you did leave, like we did, they declared us suppressive persons. And this meant no Scientologist was allowed to communicate in any way with us, and we were in fact excommunicated. I would advise anybody and everybody to have nothing to do with Scientology, as although we were fortunate that our suffering wasn't too intense, it did cost us our house and would have cost us much more had we stayed. The religion angle is just that, an angle. People involved in Scientology will tell anyone that it is a religion, but amongst themselves they readily acknowledge that it isn't, unless the worship of money is religious. I was involved with Scientology for 17 years, starting from my early 20s. It presented itself as a self-improvement system and a modern science of mental health. Isn't that the angle that NXIVM used as well? I don't trust any of these self-help anything anymore. And a modern science of mental health, promising to help me achieve my dreams by making me a dynamic, confident, successful, and happy person, free from irrational fears or phobias, cured from many diseases and immune to others. Resisting the pressure to join the staff, I remained a paying customer. Joining the staff would have involved working 100 plus hours per week for a pittance, much less than minimum wage, and only getting Christmas Day off to see family if I had worked hard enough. The cheaper introductory courses had a few interesting and useful ideas in them, but their real purpose, combined with a continuous bombardment of promotions and success stories, was to create a desire or desperation to take the more expensive services, where all my problems would resolve. The well-timed big sell arrived, and they pressured me into taking a loan without the knowledge of my partner. After initially paying several thousands of pounds to get the promised results, the cost of additional services needed to get me out of the hole I now found myself in soon turned into tens of thousands coupled with extra hidden costs. Membership fees, demands for donations for new buildings, and legal battles. Spiraling out of control over 100K pound, all of which we were paid under duress in loans and on numerous credit cards, some of which were arranged via the organization in questionable circumstances. My experience was common amongst other customers and staff, some going bankrupt or taking out IVAs, selling their properties, donating inheritances, and divorce settlements, and so on. It's the biggest parasite. After leaving the organization on the brink of financial ruin, it took me 7 painful years to get out of debt and to regain a healthy credit score. I was lucky in that I had a decent income. Others may not have been so fortunate. Besides the extortion, my health issues and phobias were not resolving. I had high blood pressure, and they expected me to treat this with vitamins and exercise, hoping their services would eventually do the trick. When I eventually parted ways with the organization and sought the correct medical treatment, my blood pressure was dangerously high. Had I not got the correct treatment, I may not be here today. It was common in the organization to discourage medicine and especially psychiatric drugs, like the ones LRH was taking, preventing people from getting the best care needed. An abundance of conspiracy theories about pharmaceutical companies, the mental health industry, and general medicine bred through the followers, eliciting more donations to save them from such evils. Scientology is a totalitarian organization that seeks to control its members and anyone else around. There is even a policy called command intention, meaning whatever the current leader demands, all staff and followers are to comply with, no questions asked. All orders from seniors are expected to be carried out by their subordinates, like children, with harsh penalties for failing to do so. Even paying customers suffer the same level of control, getting several phone calls per day until they agreed to whatever. One time they made me clean out the sauna as a punishment. Imagine all the kids having to clean out that sauna. During a visit to the East Grinstead headquarters, someone decided I was to stay there for a week and pay a 10,000 pound service. There was no alternative. They told me, and I witnessed their fear of not wanting to inform their superior, that I couldn't do it. Blackmail like on crack in this place. They held me down there for several days using various manipulative techniques. Apparently, I did not have permission to leave. Whilst there, I saw a lady storm off and leave. Within half an hour, they had gone to her home and brought her back in. I used to get people turning up at my house unannounced, and one time had someone turn up to my workplace in Birmingham, demanding that I take time off and finish my current course. A lot of these people need to be in jail, let's just be honest. Overall, followers are under constant pressure to donate vast sums of money, to spend at least 12 hours a week taking services with no breaks in between, to turn up to every promotional event and buy the latest releases, to donate materials to libraries to support and take part in their outreach activities, and to promote Scientology to others, all whilst trying to keep a job and a family and to keep a roof over their heads. These are not just the actions of a few members. Scientology's policies are ingrained with an ends justifies the means mentality. Their ultimate goal is to have all governments under their control. This is a very Illuminati-like statement. You guys know. Scientology may not be big in the UK compared to other countries, but they are buying up expensive real estate off the back of overworked, abused, manipulated, and deceived British citizens, giving up their homes and inheritances, whilst not telling them about the few $1 billion they have in reserves in the US, or the millions of dollars they waste each year trying to harass and silence critics. Imagine, you guys, that the only requirement of being called a critic is just simply asking questions. Kind of like the last 5 years. Huh. So similar. It must be a conspiracy. In the current climate of disinformation, I don't like that word, or misinformation. It's a made-up word. Made-up concept. Climate of disinformation, dangerous cults such as Scientology that are major spreaders of such anti-scientific lies, using them to profit from people's fears and subsequently bleeding them dry, need to be investigated and brought to account. DG. Yeah, we're all waiting. We're all waiting. I am writing to you as a concerned former citizen of England. I am originally from Switzerland, and I grew up as a child in Scientology. Because of that, I have been victim to abuse and neglect during my childhood, including no proper education and being coerced at the age of 9 to sign a contract to work for the Church of Scientology for the remainder of my life. But I would like to focus on my time in England between 2005, age 13, and 2012, age 20. I was moved along with my parents under false pretenses to England to work for the Church of Scientology as so-called Sea Org members, the most elite workforce for Scientology, as its main headquarters at St. Hill in East Grinstead. From the age of 13 to 16, I worked during the week, about 6 hours, and on the weekends, usually 8 to 10 hours. They're just stealing children's childhoods. From the age of 16, my workday was 12 to 14 hours, for 7 days a week. We were under constant watch from other staff and cameras, and where they're never allowed to leave the premises unless strict permission to do so. They don't want people to leave. How's that working out for you, Scientology? Just making people want to leave more. Somebody should have done a spell check. We were daily transported from our berthing at Walsh Manor in Crowborough to St. Hill. I lived in badly maintained housing, single-panel windows, rotten wood at the windows. During winter, not always heating, insects in the room, poor ventilation. And I was housed in a small room with a total of 12 men, 6 bunk beds. That's where all children should be, right? Sounds like this is a male child. My personal possessions were few, and to be frank, I hardly ever had the chance to enjoy them. I worked more than 100 hours a week, yet my weekly pay was between £0 and £20 a few times. I even had gotten $50 pound, but that happened maybe 6 times in all my years working there. When I was about 16, I came to realize that I am in fact homosexual, but I was not able to come out or seek help advice, as Scientology is extremely homophobic. I was under a lot of distress and became very depressed and suicidal. At the age of 20, I could not bear it any longer, and I wanted to take my own life, and thus communicated it to the right authorities at St. Hill. No names, of course. I told them that in order to protect the church, I would like to route out so as to kill myself while not officially working for the church any longer. I assumed they would want to help me so as not to lose a valid member. Instead of showing concern, compassion, or offering help, they proceeded to start the process to get me out of the headquarters as soon as possible, so as to get rid of a major problem. To answer the question why I did not just walk out, or walk away much sooner, or just go to the doctor or a psychiatrist for help, I grew up in this very controlling environment. I was never permitted to be on the internet or have any contact with the outside world. I was living a very isolated life, not knowing how life outside of Scientology was actually like. It's just like a prison. Just like a prison. I think prisoners have more freedom. During my time as a child and as an adult, I was constantly given propaganda about the outside world. It's how they thrive. Mass media, anyone? How it is unsafe, there are always wars, most people are drug addicts and criminals. How doctors do not wish to actually heal you, as they much rather keep you sick, so as to make more money. That's Scientology right there. And that psychiatrists and psychologists will try to lobotomize or use electric shock therapy with anyone they can. I was very frightened of a world without Scientology, as I was constantly told how Scientology was the only thing in this world that actually is good and is trying to help mankind. And so if I were to leave, I would have no chance of survival, let alone be able to have a happy life. On top of that, I was considered to be a lower class of person, or as Scientology would categorize me, as a degraded being, an aberration due to my homosexuality. Wonder what all these LGBTQ organizations would think about all the anti-gay in Scientology. Ideally, one of these organizations that had a lot of money, just like Scientology. Things to think about. And so if I were to leave, I would have no chance of survival, let alone be able to have a happy life. On top of that, I was considered to be a lower class of person, or as Scientology would categorize me, as a degraded being, an aberration due to my homosexuality. In the Sea Org, there is no such thing as retirement. I know of two adults by the name of John Cox and Robert Edwards, who worked almost to the last day of their life. They both were over 80 years old. There are a couple of other seniors I knew who passed away while I worked there, but I do not recall their names. If targets were not met, then there were severe punishments. This included staying on work for several more hours, being publicly shamed, made to do demeaning labor, not allowed to eat the regular food, but instead dry rice and beans, denied the time to sleep, reduced pay, or even no pay at all. As I was working in the kitchen, cooking the food for the staff, I can inform that during most of my time there, it was just myself and one other person having to cook. I think this is SP Chef. Clean the kitchen and storeroom, wash up, clean all the dining rooms, do the food order, etc. for 350 people. Imagine all these adults signed off on that. All these adults that were getting served food from children, they all signed off on it. There is no other guy did it, or Scientology, like in quotations, that Scientology did this. Everyone's participating in it, in thought control, and that's why it's working. Not to say I don't have some understanding, I do, but the budget for such a number of staff for 3 meals a day was about £2,000 a week. That would come to less than 30 pence per person per meal. Indeed, this has been more than 10 years ago, but Scientology doctrine is based on the works of the founder L. Ron Hubbard, and it is per their own policies. That's what I keep telling the government officials, that they are not allowed to alter the technology. You know, the fake dogma. This would then also mean that not only could they have to continue with their very abusive behavior, but that it would be done worldwide in all the Scientology churches. Although I now live back in Switzerland and am not part of Scientology any longer, I am still suffering from all the abuse I suffered under, and Scientology is still in operation in the UK. I plead that you please investigate and inform yourself. Please look up stories of victims of Scientology. There are hundreds of individuals who have come forward and have spoken out, and there are thousands of videos on YouTube, newspaper articles, and blogs describing all the abuse that Scientology has been a part of for decades. SZ. I started doing Scientology courses from the age of 6. As a member of public in South Africa, then arrived in England in 1973 to join what they call the Sea Organization. 6 years old. 6 years old. Troll. At age 11, just before my 12th birthday, I was sent by myself completely alone, where's the parents, to join the flagship Apollo in Lisbon. The intention was for me to become what they call a Commodore's messenger, working directly with L. Ron Hubbard. Wonder if this is a girl or a boy. From the day I got there, I wanted to go straight back home to my mother in the UK, but was not allowed to. And where's Mom in all this stuff? I did physical work on the ship for a few months and thought the only way I could get off the ship and back to my family was if I was as naughty as possible. I was sent to work for what they called the ethics officer, and he set me to work to file a backlog pile of knowledge reports. That's the snitch system. This was just one of a few naughty things that I did that got me into a lot of trouble. Unfortunately for me, the Rehabilitation Project Force had just been formed, and so had the RPF's RPF. I was assigned to the RPF, then the RPF's RPF, where one was forced to wear black boiler suits and a black armband. One was not allowed to talk to the other members of the crew, and you had to do physical work all day and study at night. You don't have any time off, and you eat after everyone else has eaten. We're talking about children here, you guys. If there was food left. I still didn't want to stay and wanted to go back to my family, so after a while I was locked up in the chain locker. There we go again. Funny how Mike Rinder never talked about this, did he? Does anybody ever remember Mike Rinder talking about all the children that were locked up in the chain locker? I believe Mike Rinder was a teenager at that time. I still didn't want to stay and wanted to go back to my family, and so after a while, I was locked up in the chain locker of the ship by L. Ron Hubbard. After 3 days and 3 nights, it sounds very biblical, I was eventually offloaded and sent back to be with my family in the UK, but not before having had to petition L. Ron Hubbard for permission to do so. I do wonder why L. Ron Hubbard let her go. Once back in the UK, I was sent back to school. What is going on here, you guys? She has a family in the UK, and now she's going to a Scientology school, I think? Once back in the UK, I was sent back to school, but during my A-levels was taken out of school, against my will, and parents are nowhere to be found, I guess, and made to work for what they call the guardian's office. Boy, you guys, do I have good intuition or what? I believe Mike Rinder worked in the guardian's office before they changed it to OSA. At age 14, I was sodomized and didn't tell anyone, as I felt so ashamed. That's rape. That's rape. You guys, here's the pattern again. Here's the pattern. You guys know and I know that the perpetrators of those young girls, children, are probably never going to see a day in jail, and probably a lot of them have croaked, thankfully. It's just like a smorgasbord for these predators. I wish people would have named the names. Like it wouldn't hurt anything to tell people who raped you. It's a fact. If it happened. And you know what they're going to do? Deny, 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 like they always do. The perpetrator admitted to his wife what he had done. And she reported it. I really wish I knew who the names were. You guys know they're going to horribly penalize, torture, and punish the young girl that was raped now, right? I was then hauled into the ethics office and told that it was my fault it happened. She's out 2D. And that I was not allowed to report it to law enforcement. Law enforcement seems to be okay with this too. I continued to work for the organization for a few more years before finally managing to make my escape in 1982. I was the last of my family to leave, But the catalyst for me wanting to leave was that my mother had suffered a stroke at age 42. Due to the stresses that she was under, having to work for the organization till 3 o'clock every morning for at least 3 weeks, something like that. So you guys, that tells us a lot. This young girl was raped on the Apollo, like I believe 99% of them were, to be honest. So whomever raped this young girl was a married man. That would boil it down to who it was. And the wife reported him. At least somebody did something decent, but it's not enough. This is just a small snapshot of what happened to me. There's a lot more to say. This is a dangerous cult, and they continue to use children for forced labor. It has to stop. Initials DC. I personally, as a young 15-year-old, was permitted to go to London nightclub after having successfully cleaned the windows of a Scientology building with newspaper. As a child visiting England, I thought this was, of course, fantastic. I was being treated as an adult in a child's body. Anything could have happened to me that night. I came from a small village in another country and had no idea about the dangers in the world. Treating children like adults and allowing them adult freedoms is nothing short of abuse. It's funny how all of us can figure this out, but the governments, they can't figure it out. Could it be that maybe some of them are involved? Hello? As a younger child, I also remember very clearly going to the jeweler's with my mom. My mom tried to sell her jewelry to get some money for food and bills and an unpaid mortgage, as Scientology had convinced my dad to give them all the family money for courses. On another occasion, I was asked, as a member of the public, to pop into a room just off the reception area for a chat. Soon I was sat there as a young lone female with 3 men much older than me, because, you know, it's how they like it. Just go look and see at all these old men that are marrying these young girls. It's sick. I was extremely scared as I was seated furthest from the door. I was, of course, on purpose, you guys. I was asked to sign a billion-year contract. I was there for hours being word cleared on help. Various other men in uniform came and went, the fake uniforms, it's just a joke, in which showing various references as to why joining the Sea Org was a good thing. Eventually, I was left with 2 females in uniform. The organization had closed, and it was now only us and security staff. I was coerced into voluntarily signing the contract in the early hours of the morning. Isn't that when they sign, that's a covenant, right? You religious scholars could tell me that. It's some type of signing over your soul. That's what it seems like to me. I have never been so panicked. I had been informed I would have to disconnect all contact with my mom for her anger at my dad giving all the money to Scientology. Huh. You guys knew that would be the first thing they do with a young girl, right? I have also witnessed, I really wish they would have done a good spell check. Come on, you guys. I know some people are not native English speakers. I'm not talking about that. It just shows, it doesn't seem professional when you don't even check the spelling or the grammar. And I'm not perfect. I've also witnessed a very distressed friend, absolutely distraught, as her elderly mother had no money for food, was starving and in distress, all because she had been convinced to hand her money over to the church for the betterment of her spiritual freedom, leaving her nothing to take care of her physical self. Like I said, it's a parasite. The occasion that finally got me out of Scientology was when a very dear friend of and new Scientologist got cancer. The Church of Scientology said they can help with that, had a remedy. They built his hopes up. He sadly died a few weeks later. The process for handling cancer can be found in what they call the scriptures. Any writing or lecture by L. Ron Hubbard in the organization's series. Part 14 of 20. The Scale of Havingness, Lecture 29, November 1956. Ravings of a lunatic, honestly. Cancer, always requires a second dynamic or sexual upset. This is cancer at the outset. We have processed such things as wasting babies and accepting babies and mocking up babies and throwing them away and doing such like and so on. L. Ron Hubbard from the above lecture. What does that mean? What does that mean? These processes have to be paid for. What church puts a dying man through that? No other church I know, that's for sure. My final straw. Please stop all this abuse happening here in the UK. S.A. Gotta get some water. At age 6, I was put onto the e-meter, and my Scientologist parents were told I was a suppressive person, pure evil, after I failed a security check. This is an invasive interrogation. I would be regularly interrogated for years on the e-meter as they attempted to remove the evil from me. My parents were told that they had to either handle me or disconnect from me. This is sick. I was consistently punished under Scientology ethics instructions. The doctrine of Scientology led to the breakdown of my family relationships. Extended non-Scientology family members were disconnected from us all. The organization demanded so much money that my family was in serious debt. The church do not care about their parishioners. By the time I was 16, I was living alone after being kicked out of my home. I required many years of mental health support to recover from the abuse I experienced. Scientology is harmful, especially to children. I believe that the books and services should be banned in the UK, and the organization investigated and brought up to justice. Scientology is a destructive cult. KG. So I will leave a link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Peace.